The rule was not written in the Dominion's law codes. It appeared nowhere in the military statutes taught at the officer academies on Threx Prime. It existed the way old rules exist among people who have stopped asking why, passed from commander to commander, whispered from senior officer to junior officer, carried aboard every vessel that had ever docked at Containment Station Ilver for longer than a supply run. Never wake the human. Ilver was not a famous station. It orbited a dead moon in an unremarkable system on the Dominion's inner ring, 3 jumps from anywhere anyone wanted to be. Its official designation was Long-Term Biological Containment and Research Facility 7. Its unofficial designation, among the 400 crew who rotated through it, was the Sleeping House. The station had one occupant who never rotated out. He had been there for 61 years. Officially, his file was marked Asset, Do Not Disturb, Priority Alpha. Unofficially, every crew member who served aboard Ilver was told the same 3 things on their first day, by whichever senior officer drew the assignment of orientation. First, there is a human in Containment Bay 9. Second, he is not a prisoner, not exactly, and not a guest, not exactly, and the difference matters less than you think. Third, whatever you do, whatever emergency arises, whatever a superior officer above the rank of station commander orders you to do, you do not wake him. No one aboard Ilver in the last 40 years had ever needed a fuller explanation. The rule was old enough that it had stopped requiring one. It had simply become part of the station's physics. The way reactor core stays cold was part of the station's physics. The Dominion kept meticulous records of everything it built, and Ilver's construction file was no exception. Commissioned 61 years ago, at a cost that had raised questions in 3 separate budget committees, the station had been designed for exactly one purpose, and its blueprints reflected it in ways that made visiting inspectors uneasy. Containment Bay 9 sat at the station's structural center, buried behind 4 independent hull layers, powered by 3 redundant reactors, any one of which could sustain the field alone. The bay's door was rated to withstand a warship's main battery at close range. It had never once been tested against anything, because nothing had ever tried to get in, and nothing had ever tried, with any real effort, to get out. 41 systems, 9 centuries of law, and one facility built around the quiet, unspoken understanding that the greatest risk the Dominion had ever measured did not come from an enemy fleet, or a rival empire, or a rebellion in the outer colonies. It came from 4 minutes of confusion in a single room, and the Dominion had spent 61 years and an unlisted fortune making sure those 4 minutes never happened again. This is the story of the one night someone asked why. His name, according to the containment file, was Cade Reyes. Human. Age at intake, 34. Age now by the numbers 95, though the file noted, in a clipped annotation nobody had bothered to update in decades, that biological aging inside the stasis field was effectively arrested, subject to review. Commander Sella Verne, who had run Ilver for the last 11 years, had read Cade's intake file more times than she could count. She had read it the way people reread a passage they do not fully believe, checking each time to see if the words had changed. They never had. Cade Reyes had been a maintenance technician on a Dominion supply convoy 61 years ago, during what the history archives called the Threxian-Korathi border conflict. 3 weeks of fighting between the Dominion and a splinter Korathi fleet over a mining concession, neither side particularly needed. His convoy had been boarded. Standard procedure. Standard casualties expected. What happened over the following 9 hours was in the file too, in the flat clinical language military reports use for things that do not fit clean categories. Convoy boarded by 11 Korathi Marines. Convoy retaken by 3:40 hours. Korathi casualties, 11. Human casualties, 0. Attending physician's note filed the next morning read simply: subject declined medical evaluation. Subject requested a shower and 8 hours of sleep. Granted. Vern had read that line the first time she took command and had sat with it for 11 minutes before moving to the next page. There was more in the file: incident reports, redacted sections, a psychological evaluation that had been requested 3 times and completed 0 times because the subject had, each time, simply declined to attend. But the part that mattered was this. At the end of the conflict, the Dominion High Command had made a decision. Cade Reyes would not be returned to human space. He would not be tried, executed, or released. He would be contained, indefinitely, under conditions of maximum security and minimum disturbance. And the reasoning for that decision had been sealed at a classification level that Vern, 11 years into command of the facility built specifically to house him, did not have clearance to read. He had gone into stasis 61 years ago. He had not been woken since. He did not announce himself because he had never been conscious long enough to. He simply existed, quietly, in Containment Bay 9, on a low platform under soft blue light, and every person who ever stood at the viewing window and looked in reported the same strange, small disappointment. He looked like a man asleep. Nothing more. Vern had come to Ilver from a combat posting, which was unusual. Most station commanders assigned to long-term containment facilities came from administrative backgrounds, people whose careers ran toward paperwork rather than away from it. She had commanded a frigate during the Dominion's brief conflict with the Osethi border clans, had seen combat that had earned her 3 commendations she did not display, and had requested Ilver specifically, against the advice of 2 superior officers who considered it a demotion. She had never told anyone the real reason. It was in the 11th line of a report she had read as a junior officer, long before she had any reason to think it mattered. A report about a supply convoy, a boarding, and a technician who had kept 6 unarmed people alive with nothing but his hands and the simple, stubborn refusal to let a bad night become worse. She had wanted, ever since, to be the kind of officer who understood what that meant. 11 years into command, she still was not certain she did, but she had come closer than anyone else who had held the post before her. Sublieutenant Torv Kesach arrived on Ilver 8 months into his first commission, and he arrived the way certain officers arrive at postings they consider beneath them: competent, ambitious, and quietly convinced that the posting itself was a mistake someone above him would eventually correct. He was good at his job. That was not in question. He had graduated 3rd in his class at the Threxian War College, had a service record with no marks against it, and had the particular confidence of someone who had never once in his career been wrong about anything that mattered. His fellow officers respected him. Several of them liked him. He had a way of asking questions that made the room lean toward his answer before anyone else had given theirs. He heard the rule on his first day, the way everyone did. He nodded, the way everyone did. And for 8 months, he did not test it, not because he believed it, but because there had been no occasion. The occasion came at the quarterly briefing, in the observation lounge above Containment Bay 9, with 11 officers present and Commander Vern seated at the head of the table reviewing supply manifests she had already reviewed twice. Kesach raised the subject the way certain officers raise a subject they have been saving, which is to say, with the timing and tone of someone who has prepared it. 61 years, he said, to no one in particular, looking down through the viewing window at the platform below. 61 years and a full station complement to guard 1 sleeping animal. He let the silence sit for exactly as long as silence needs to sit before it becomes a question. I've read the incident report from the boarding. 11 Marines. I've also read that nobody has ever verified the report independently, because the only witness available for questioning has been unconscious for 6 decades. He turned from the window. I'd like to know what we're actually protecting the Dominion from, because from where I'm standing, it looks like we're protecting a legend. Several of the junior officers smiled. It was the particular category of smile that happens in rooms where a hierarchy is quietly being tested. Not cruelty, not mockery, Just the small collective recognition that someone had said the thing everyone had privately wondered, and no one had been senior enough to say aloud. Commander Verne did not smile. She set down the manifest she was holding and she said nothing, and her nothing filled more of the room than Kesach's question had. She had read the sealed file. Kesach had not. She had been waiting, since the day she took command, for exactly this conversation to happen in exactly this room, because she had learned the way every commander before her had learned, that the rule survives only as long as someone is willing to explain it, and eventually, someone always asks. "You want to know what we're protecting the Dominion from, Lieutenant?" she said finally. "I do." "Then let's find out together." She did not order him woken. That was the detail Kesach would replay later, when he had time to replay things. She did not raise her voice, did not threaten a formal reprimand, did not do any of the things a commander does when reasserting authority over a subordinate who has overstepped. She opened a terminal. "There's a question you should ask first," she said. "Before you ask what we're protecting the Dominion from, you should ask what happens to the people standing closest to him when he wakes up frightened, confused, and certain he is still being attacked." She looked at Kesach directly. "That's a reasonable question to have skipped. Most people skip it. Do you want the incident number or do you want to watch it?" The room had gone very still. "Watch what?" Kesach said. "The last time it happened," Verne said. "Accidentally. 19 years ago. A power fluctuation, a stasis field failure, 4 minutes of consciousness before the backup systems reasserted containment." She pulled the file forward on the display. 4 minutes. Kesach looked at the number on the screen and said nothing. The footage was not dramatic in the way that combat simulations were dramatic. It was documentary station security recordings, unedited, time-stamped, the kind of footage that comes with no music and no framing and is worse for it. Incident 1, 19 years ago. Timestamp 03:12. The recording showed Containment Bay 9 at rest, the platform under its soft blue light, 3 technicians running a routine diagnostic. At 3:14:7, the stasis field indicator changed from a steady blue to a flickering amber. Nobody in the room reacted immediately, because nobody had ever seen the indicator do that before, and there is a particular kind of hesitation that happens when a warning has never once, in living memory, needed to be understood. By the time the senior technician reached for the emergency containment override, 11 seconds had passed. The recording showed the human sit up on the platform, not violently, not with any visible panic, simply a fast, precise, economical motion that covered the distance between lying down and standing in under a second. It showed him assess the room. The recording had audio, and there was none from him, no shout, no question, just a silence that lasted exactly as long as it took him to identify that the 3 people in the room were wearing Dominion uniforms and were not, currently, holding weapons pointed at him. Then it showed the stasis field reassert itself, 4 minutes and 11 seconds after it had failed, and the human lay back down without ever having said a word. Nobody had been hurt. The report noted, in the same clipped language as the intake file, subject took no hostile action. Subject's positioning during the 4-minute window placed him between the containment breach and the 2 junior technicians present, nearest the door, in what the reviewing analyst assessed as a defensive posture assumed reflexively and without instruction. Kesach was not smiling anymore. "That's the good incident," Verne said. "That's the one where nothing happened. I have 3 more. Incident 2, 38 years ago. This one had audio worth hearing. A different containment failure, longer this time, 6 minutes, during a period when Ilver had been short-staffed and running with a skeleton night crew. 2 guards had been present in the bay when the field dropped, both new, both unbriefed on the specific protocol for a live failure because the protocol had not been updated to reflect that scenario in over a decade. The recording showed both guards raise their weapons the instant the human sat up. It showed him identify the threat in less than a second, cross the distance to the nearer guard before either of them could fire, and disarm him, Not violently, the report specified, with no injury inflicted beyond a wrist strain, the weapon set down on the floor, not thrown, not used. It showed him back away from the second guard with both hands visible, and it showed him say, in the recording's only line of audio from the entire 61 years of containment, 4 words, "I'm not the enemy." The field reasserted 6 minutes and 40 seconds after failure. He was unconscious again before either guard had finished radioing for backup. By this point, no one in the observation lounge was smiling. Kasach was watching with the expression of someone doing a calculation that was going to take longer than the briefing had scheduled for. Incident 3, 61 years ago. Boarding of Convoy Meridian 7. This was the incident from the intake file. Verne had pulled the actual footage, not the report, the footage, retrieved from the convoy's own recorders and archived alongside Cade's containment file under the same classification that had kept it sealed from every officer who had ever asked what the rule was protecting against. It showed 11 Korathi Marines breach the maintenance deck at 3:11 hours. It showed the convoy's skeleton crew, 6 technicians, unarmed, none of them combat personnel, attempt to barricade the engineering bay. It showed 1 technician, a woman named Priya Ose, according to the crew manifest displayed alongside the footage, take a wound to the shoulder in the first 90 seconds. And it showed Cade Ray's maintenance technician, no combat designation on record, no weapons training noted in his file, cross the engineering bay in the dark and put himself, unarmed, between the breach point and the 5 technicians still standing. The footage from that point on was hard to watch, not because it was graphic, the recorders had not been positioned for detail, but because of how quiet it was. There was no shouting. There was very little movement that read as effort. 11 Marines entered the bay over the following 9 hours in staggered waves, and 11 Marines did not leave it. And through all 9 hours, the recording showed the same 6 technicians, alive, huddled in the same corner they had barricaded in the first 90 seconds, none of them ever having fired a weapon, because none of them had one. The attending physician's report appeared on screen at the end, the same line Verne had read 100 times before command. Subject declined medical evaluation. Subject requested a shower and 8 hours of sleep. Granted. He was not tried for murder, Verne said quietly, into the silence the footage left behind. The convoy crew testified, every one of them. The Dominion Tribunal spent 4 months trying to determine what to charge a man with for keeping 6 unarmed people alive for 9 hours against a force sent to kill them, and in the end, they did not charge him with anything. They classified him instead. There was a 4th file in the archive, and Verne had almost not pulled it, because it was the only one that did not end the way the others did. Incident 4, 52 years ago. This was not a containment failure. It was, according to the record, a deliberate test, the only one the Dominion had ever formally authorized, conducted under laboratory conditions with a full medical team standing by and every safeguard the science division could design. The stated purpose was straightforward: determine, once and for all, whether the subject represented a controllable asset or an unmanageable liability, and settle the question that had been quietly dividing high command since the day he was contained. They woke him on purpose, fully, deliberately, for 6 hours, in a secured chamber with observers behind reinforced glass. The footage showed him wake the way he always woke: fast, silent, oriented within seconds. It showed him take in the room, the glass, the 12 armed guards positioned around its perimeter, and the medical team waiting with restraints they did not, in the end, need to use. It showed him sit back down on the edge of the platform, hands visible, and wait. He did not attack. He did not attempt to escape, though the chamber's door had been left, deliberately, unsecured for the final 90 minutes of the test, a detail the observing scientists had included specifically to measure intent. He answered every question put to him through the glass, in short, direct sentences, and the transcript of those 6 hours was the longest continuous record of his voice that existed anywhere in the Dominion archive. Vern had read it more times than the intake file. There was one exchange in it she had never been able to stop thinking about. Observer, do you understand why you are being contained? Subject, because the last time I woke up confused, someone almost died who didn't have to. Observer, does that anger you? Subject, it would anger me more to wake up again and have it happen for real. The test concluded with the Science Division's formal recommendation, filed the same day, that containment continue under existing protocols. Not because the subject had failed the test, but because he had passed it so completely that the division's report used a phrase Vern had never seen in any other Dominion document, about any other subject, in her entire career. Recommend continued containment at subject's own, repeatedly stated preference. He had asked to go back under. At the end of the 6 hours, unprompted, he had asked. Kesach found his voice. Classified him as what? As something we didn't have a category for, Vern said. A weapon that had never once in 61 years needed to be told when to stop. She looked at him. We don't keep him contained because we're afraid of what he'll do if he wakes up angry, Lieutenant. In 61 years, angry has never once been the problem. We keep him contained because the last 3 times he woke up confused, not attacked, not threatened, just confused, disoriented, unsure for 4 minutes whether the war was still happening. The outcome was still a disarmed guard and a technician with a strained wrist. Do you understand what I am telling you? Kesach did not answer immediately. We are not protecting the Dominion from him, Vern said. We are protecting whoever happens to be standing near him in the 4 minutes it takes him to remember the war is over. The rule was never about controlling a threat, Lieutenant. It was about giving a man who has spent 61 years defending people who never asked him to, one small mercy, the mercy of never having to wake up and do it again. Kesach stood at the viewing window for a long time after the footage ended. The other officers had filed out quietly, the particular quiet of people who had come to a briefing expecting an answer and left instead with a wait they had not budgeted time for. He stopped at the door before he left. The 4 minutes, he said, not turning around. In every incident where it happened by accident, he never once tried to leave the station. And the one time we asked him on purpose, he asked to go back under. He shook his head slowly. I came in here today thinking the rule was about controlling something dangerous. It isn't. It's the only kindness this entire Dominion has ever bothered to give him. And we almost took it away, because I wanted a better story to tell in the officer's mess. He could have, Vern agreed. He didn't. No. Kesach looked at the platform below one more time, at the still shape under the soft blue light, and there was nothing in his expression that read as satisfaction or embarrassment. Only the flat, recalibrating look of someone updating a number he had been certain of an hour ago. I owe the technicians in that room an apology, he said. For the tone, if nothing else. You do, Vern said. That's yours to give, not mine. He nodded once and left without another word. Vern stayed at the window a while longer. On the platform below, nothing had changed. The same still shape, the same soft light, the same silence that had held for 61 years and would hold, if the station did its job correctly, for as many more as it took. Beside the platform, in a sealed case that had traveled with him from the convoy and never once been opened, sat the only personal item in his intake inventory. A technician's multi-tool, standard Dominion supply issue, the kind every maintenance crew carried and never thought twice about. It had been logged, sealed, and stored beside him for 61 years, the one object from his old life that had made the journey into this one. Vern opened the station's quarterly assessment log, the record every commander before her had kept, the one place in the entire Dominion archive where the truth about Containment Bay 9 was written in something other than classified language. She found the entry from her predecessor, 11 years old, 3 words long, and she understood it now the way she had not understood it the day she took command. the day she took command.